they give you a roster or give
Yeah,
you an
my
idea of how many?
roster showed approximately 29 or 30.
Okay.
So it's only
Maybe
one
I'm going to be
o'clock.
late.
Yeah, yeah, it's just about 1 o'clock right now. So I think maybe if I just ramp up a little slowly, we won't miss any information as we proceed.
I actually have 2 minutes to one.
Do ya? All right. Well, there we go. We got a timekeeper. Yeah, I guess we do. Plenty of time. Plenty of time.
Mike, I emailed the OSHER office, and one of them is supposed to come into this meeting, and they have administrative privileges, and they will make you host. Then you can assign your co-host, who will be able to mute people who are making a lot of noise and disturbing the class, which is an important function to have available.
Well, where I come from, we just hit them with a pie. But
Well, I invite you to try.
we do have the technology. Sandy, Sandy is my co-host, so if they're gonna tweak the system, they should have that information. But thank you very much, Robert, because whatever benefits I have as host, it sounds like one of them is better visibility, and that's great.
It's the ability to share your screen, which you do not have when you're just a participant. The default setting for all OSHER Zoom meetings is only the host can share screen.
Got it.
So it's a good thing you were planning on showing it on the video monitor, because you would have had no other option.
Yeah, well, that was one of my. The last time I ran this, we had a Q&A, and someone was suggesting throw this up as a slide presentation, and I would have had to use pretty much all of my week converting and tweaking and rearranging my set. And end of the day, here we are.
Okay, and since you can't make me co-host, I'll just monitor, but I will keep myself mute.
Great. And I would ask also right now if everyone could mute themselves. And if there is a reason, if there is a question, raise your hand. But again, I'm going to say better off typing in the chat. And Sandy will be keeping track of that, and we'll revisit that towards the end.
Mike, OSHER did come to the meeting. They just made you host.
Yes.
So now if you would make Sandy co-host, do you know how to do that?
I haven't the foggiest.
All right, if you take your cursor and you hover it over her video square.
Okay. Sandy, where are you? Here you are. Yes, video square. Ask.
You'll see a blue box with 3 dots. Click on it. You'll get a drop-down menu. One of them says make co-host.
Make
And
co-host.
if you do that, that'll give her the ability to mute people if need be who are not muting themselves. Good, you got it done. Excellent.
Thank you, Robert. Is your experience in IT by any chance?
No, but I am one of the instructors for the OSHER program who teaches study leaders how to utilize Zoom to teach their class.
Good, because
The classes are off.
IT is very scary. Here it is right here. Proof. Right?
It is for much of us. You got to practice this stuff. All right, I'll leave you to your class.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. I think we have you on mute right now, and if we don't, please help me out and put yourself on mute. Okay? If you can hear me, all right, just hold up your thumb for me. Excellent. Very good. Good. Well, I'll say it again. I'm absolutely thrilled to be here. This has been an ongoing project of mine, and as I mentioned earlier, if you just joined in, I've presented it once before for a group called the Circus Educators at a conference they had recently, and it was very well received. I was surprised by that, how many people that are still actively involved in the circus have the same interests you do. So there you go. So you share in common. In case you're wondering, my name is Mike Perry. I'm currently a storyteller, and I started out as a circus clown. You may ask, how did this come to be? You may not ask how this came to be. It doesn't matter, because I'm going to tell you either way. When I was about 12 years old, I saw a unicycle and I had to have it. I think one broken ankle later, I managed to survive that. And I was that kid in the neighborhood that everyone pointed at as he rode by. In high school, I juggled, and one thing led to another. And anyhow, by age 19, I found myself in clown college, and after that, Ringling Brothers for 2 years. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Because I'm a storyteller, let me phrase it to you this way. I was about 15 years ago, maybe 10 years ago, I was between opportunities, which is entertainer speak for where's my next gig. A very dear friend of mine who was involved in teaching circus arts to kids was doing residency up in Maine. So I flew to Boston. I rented what I can only describe as a clown car because it was so small. It only had letters. It only had room on the hood for 4 letters, F-I-A-T. I mean, it was really a roller skate. And I drove up to Maine, and there I met my friend, and I followed him around like a shadow. And I had to tell you, he was not only a friend, he was like a very dear, almost a mentor of mine. So I followed him for 2 days, and we would load up his truck every day and drive the 30 or so miles back to the hotel. And of course, this being Maine, there's no one around except the beauty, the ocean on one side of you and trees on the other. So we're headed southwest, heading back to the hotel, a 30-mile run. It's the end of the day. We're both pretty tired, and his van, classic circus vehicle, had maybe 150, 180,000 miles on it. So I wasn't too surprised when he pulled over, but I was concerned. He pulled over, it's getting near dark, and I'm thinking, oh boy, here we go. And we had spent 2 years on the road, so I knew the possibilities. It wasn't a flat tire, it could have been a water pump. My mind is going through the litany. And of course, at the same time, my mind is in 100 directions. Where do I have to be tomorrow? What time is my flight? Life is like that. So he pulls over, and I pull over behind him, and he gets out of the car, and he almost runs away from the vehicle. And now I'm very concerned. I'm going, hey, Rick, what's going on? And I catch up with him, and he's staring out at the water. He's just staring there. And then he turns to me with the most beautiful smile you've ever seen. And he says, look at that. And I look up, and I'm still concerned about his car blowing up. And he says, look at that sunset. And in that moment, apropos of this friend of mine, he took time to smell the flowers, to watch the sunset. And what's more than that is, we were in Maine. Of course, that's the Atlantic Ocean, the eastern seaboard. But because we had pulled off at this little cove, the sun was setting over the water. And so I said, this is my definition of a clown. When you can watch the sun set in the east, when you can defy the laws of nature, then you're on the way to something magical. And that's what he had. And that's, to me, the search that brought me to clowning was that little magic that you would see in characters like Red Skelton. So that's the clown that I knew. That's the clown that drew me to circus. That's the clown I think of. But by today's standard, having just gone through Halloween, if you had more than a dozen kids at your door, chances are one of them may have been a clown. And we'll talk about that today. My question throughout the day remains the same, and that is, what happened and how did this happen? And I really entertain your insights, but I'll share mine with you. Here's a brief resume. By the way, this is Rick Davis, the gentleman I just referred to, very dear friend of mine. He wrote a series of books. Each of them was called Totally Useless Skills, because that is how he defined the circus. Every one of those skills have no function. Why would you balance someone on your head and walk up a ladder? The answer is there's no purpose. There's a useless skill, but there's beauty in learning it, and there's a wonderful moment of like watching the sunset in the east, like defying gravity, defying the laws of nature. So anyhow, I met Rick in 1974. We were both lucky enough to attend and graduate from Ringling's Clown College down in Venice, Florida. Afterwards, we spent 2 years on the Blue Unit of the Ringling Show. And then after that, went to Puerto Rico with a small show. And then life pulled him in one direction, took me in another. I went back to college and got one of my degrees. And then at some point in 1985, a little restaurant called me up and said, hey, why don't you work for us? And I said, no. And they said, why don't you work for us? And I said, no. And they said, are you sure? And I said, okay, I'll do it for a year or two. And 27 years later, I was done with McDonald's, but we'll talk about that too. So, I'm sorry if I go backwards. but it's one of my many options as a clown. So here's my title for today's lesson, right? When they freed the elephants, did they kill the clowns? So I just posted something about this on my Facebook page, and I got a friend of mine commenting about how they treated the animals, and that was not the point at all. I don't want to go there, but I do like to point out that that they always had a vet on the show, but they didn't have a doctor. We used to joke that clown school was this little factory. You know, they can make another clown, you can't make an elephant. And so it's not about what happened to the circus. It's really about what happened to clowns. You know, we got set free into the real world, and there's my little logo there. I had to fold my feet in two, right? Smaller shoes really pinch when you're used to all that room. So what did happen here? These are pictures from the show. This is actually a photo that you'll see on screen, but this is me at the ripe age of 19. In the back corner where my finger is right here, you can see the Superdome. That's 1975 in New Orleans.
Take it down a little bit.
That's 1975 in New Orleans. Oh, the picture, right? Yeah, sorry. Don't feed me straight lines. I'll tell you. Yeah, how's this?
Down further.
Here?
Yeah.
Oh, you know what? I'm looking at the wrong screen. Okay. Yeah. So the one with the nose is the elephant, by the way, and that's me on a unicycle.
Okay, I'm going to be in the kitchen then. How's that?
Great. Do me a favor and hit mute on the way there. So here's me on a unicycle feeding an elephant. We're just probably getting ready for the animal walk. We would walk the animals to the circus, and that was a big PR thing. So there's that. Down in the corner is a bunch of us in face. So I wanted to make sure along the way that I was getting a bit of a composite of opinions on this subject. What happened? I included some of the articles that I thought interested me, and I shared them with you. If you didn't read them, that's fine. I understand, how busy people get. But if you did read them, it would give you a good, I think, kind of a cross section of what's out there. Dave Carolion, right here, is an author. He wrote these 3 books. The first one, where's my pointer? Here. This one up here is on Dan Rice. We'll talk about him in a minute. Very famous clown from the 1860s. This center book is a book David wrote that is his experience on the road. And then here is a book he wrote also on circus posters. I love this one. This is a Polish poster. It says CYRK, and the Y is a slingshot under his arm. So I called David, and I wanted to get his opinion because I read the article that is posted here. This article is called American Clowns, blah, 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 whatever, performance history and cliche. In it, he does a very good job of kind of a cross-section over time of the history of clowns. The clown that you may know or that I may know is really specific to our time. And we'll talk about Dan Rice in a minute. He was very verbal and very political, much more like Jon Stewart or like Will Rogers. In fact, Mark Twain used him as an ideal for commentary. So he's very verbal. But David and I started talking. It turns out he was on the road the year after me, and I actually lived in New Orleans for a while, and I met him there years ago. I just didn't recall that. So we shared a lot of common stories. He was on the show, like I said, the year after me, and we were very much in line with questioning what happened and why it happened, or questioning why it happened. Here, I'm going to remind you, if I'm talking too fast, you may raise your hand. If you have questions, please write them down and we'll review them later. Backwards again. This is my subtopic, if you like. Postcards from Chaplin to Joker. I think this represents what I'm talking about very clearly. Here we have, I'll call them 2 clowns, and I'm using film as an example because if I mention a litany of very famous, excellent circus clowns, you probably wouldn't know them because circus obviously is live entertainment. But here we have the equivalent on film. The most recent, of course, being Joker. I saw this movie. It is very dark. Here's Chaplin. Charlie Chaplin was born and raised in theater. British Music Hall, which is the equivalent of vaudeville, came to the United States at a time when film was extremely new. And so he got involved in film. Obviously, I would guess everyone is aware of who Charlie Chaplin is. This is a film from 1934 called Modern Times. In this film, in this specific picture, he is like almost eaten by a machine. He becomes a cog in the wheel. And that whole film was really a metaphor for the times. It was the Industrial Revolution. Man becomes subservient to machine. Man becomes eaten by the machine, right? At some points, he's like twitching as he's putting on these things. He goes to eat and he can't even stop moving from the last job he did. So that's Chaplin in 1934. Almost 100 years later, we have Joker. Now, it dawned on me that these two are alike in that, even though Chaplin uses comedy as a commentary, Joker perhaps, well, certainly does not use comedy, psychosis maybe, but both of them are a snapshot of the times. And by that I mean, here, Chaplin is commenting on the Industrial Revolution, what it does to people. So my question today is this a comment on where we are? Is this a comment on the fear that's out there? I don't know. But it also begs the question, does art reflect a society, or does art, is it out front of society? Is it pulling us behind it? Again, I leave them all as questions. Well, I'm very consistent in going backwards before I go forward. I'll take a little clown break here because I squirrel. I'm distracted all the time. But it's funny that I go backwards because in mime, they teach you always go back before you go forward. Unknowingly, when you get up, you sit down and then you get up. There's always that little back before forward. So I think psychologically, I'm just doing the same. Today we'll take a little history lesson so that we're all on the same page when it comes to circus. Here's a picture, and I actually have this poster. It's quite large. This is a picture taken on July 17, 1956 in Heidelberg, Pennsylvania. If you drive down 79 to Heidelberg and you get off at that exit, it'll say Heidelberg Plaza. I think there's a Walmart there and a McDonald's there. It used to be a racetrack. That's why it's called the Racetrack Plaza. Up in the corner here is a racetrack, just this little circle. This big circle, of course, is the big top. July 17th, 1956, Heidelberg, Pennsylvania, the last time they performed under tent. They folded the tent, no longer a tent. That was the last show right here, Pittsburgh, PA. Huh? So here are a couple of things I'll get to in a minute. Here's a picture of Dan Rice. You can look up Dan Rice. If you read some of the information, you'll have seen under David's article a big picture of him. He was the model for Uncle Sam. Wore red, white, and blue, had a big goatee. And when you look at him, you say, of course. So there are a lot of instances where this kind of blending of culture and art that we now just take for granted. Huh? Here's Ringling. I've got it listed as 1850s to 1950s. So 1850s to 1950s is represented by the tent. In that time period, you have the 5 Ringling brothers from Baraboo, Wisconsin. You have James Bailey and, of course, Phineas T. Barnum. And by the time we were all kids, they had long since merged into Ringling Brothers, Barnum, and Bailey Circus, one circus. So at one time they were all competing. It'd be like General Motors, Chrysler, and Ford getting together, huh? So that's why you had the greatest show on earth as a result. 3 rings. Some shows were actually 5 rings. I mean, if you can, no wonder kids today are listening to the phone while they're online with, talk about too much going on, overload. Well, by the 50s, the show had run into a lot of problems. It was cumbersome. It was big, mile-long train. You can imagine setting this up every day, tearing it down. Hundreds of people, hundreds of animals. The logistics of keeping it all fed and moving and working. On top of that, you have An agrarian society is what this was built for. If you go back to the 1850s, the United States was predominantly agrarian. So farmers are subservient to the weather and to their animals. You have to milk a cow twice a day. You got to tend the fields. You're a slave to the weather. So you're not going anywhere. If you want to see entertainment, it's got to come to you. And that's what the circus did. It had a portable tent, as you know. It also brought a menagerie of animals from all over the world. It brought interesting and exciting things to see, museums of oddities. It brought exciting acts that defied gravity. In fact, I would suggest that the average farmer went to the show just to watch man overcome nature, to watch man conquer a lion. He's subservient to a cow. I watched a man conquer a lion. It empowered the audience to feel like it is possible. It is possible to ride on an elephant. And of course, at that time, animals were considered in a different light than they are today. So I think you have to take a snapshot of the times and the reaction to the times. So the circus gave permission to violate the rules of gravity. A clown would take a hammer to the head, fall down dead, stand up, laugh, and run away. So that's the agrarian society. It was a physical world. Farmers would raise animals, slaughter them, and eat them. We're a little bit removed from that these days. And we'll call it man versus nature. Once again, I'm going backwards. Michael. I'm still going backwards. Oh, yeah, I'm fired. Okay, now so we went from the circus, now we're going to go back to the arts, At the same time that the circus clown is having fun, is bringing joy to the agrarian society, you've got the birth of the Joker. In the 1860s, the Joker was added to the playing deck of cards because Germans were playing a game called euchre. I think I played it once as a kid. I don't know. But you needed this card. I'm holding it too high. Thank you. I'm looking at the wrong monitor. I'm so sorry. There it is. So here's an example of the Joker. In most playing cards today, they have their own kind of style. But I think the one that's most common is a harlequin, Arlecchino from Commedia dell'arte. He's wearing a pie costume, Simple Simon to the Pie Man. It's the big checkers, right? So the harlequin, the Joker, was an added card to the deck in the 1860s. So at the same time as Dan Rice, we have this. Then by the 1940s, DC Comics, which is now big for kids, right? To have all these heroes in print in a kind of a rag that a kid could buy. They needed a villain for one of their heroes. Of course, it's Batman. So they took a clown, beloved clown, right, and made it perverse, which is not uncommon. We'll talk about that later. But I call this clown noir. Here is an iteration of 6 of the Jokers. The one I remember the most is right here from TV. That's Cesar Romero in 1966. And then we go on, there's Jack Nicholson, right? Jack did the Joker in 88. Here is a movie that was done of the Joker. And again, I'm hoping you can see this pretty well. That was an animated version that I'm not familiar with. And then here's Heath Ledger. I believe he died doing the film. And here's the most recent, which is Joaquin Phoenix. So in my mind, you can just see darkness. It started out campy and it ended up disturbing. And so what was that? How did that happen? So that was, again, simultaneous to circus. Now we'll go back to circus. Here's one circus, 2 units. So in 1956, that last slide we had with the circus and the tent, it folded. The last of the Ringling brothers, John Ringling North. If you're ever down in Sarasota, Florida, you can see his huge mansion and his art. I think there's an art college there and theater and everything. But anyhow, he was the last of the Ringling brothers, and they were bankrupt. So he had to bring in help, and that came in the form of 3 men, 2 of them brothers, Irvin and Israel Feld. And the third one was a man named Judge Hoffheinz, who is famous for having opened the Astrodome in Houston in the 60s. So they came in. The Feld brothers were famous for promoting rock and roll stars, including Big Bopper, and I think the plane crash of the 50s, they were being promoted by the Felds at the time. They came in and they streamlined everything. They cut the show in half. They made 2 shows out of it. They put the tent away. They moved it indoors. The show that you went to see, if you went to see Ringling Brothers when you were young, was produced by the Feld Corporation, Feld Brothers. By then it would have been Irvin and his son Kenneth. And all of what you saw was a result of them streamlining in the 50s. By the 60s, they had managed to wrest control. They'd gotten enough money to actually purchase the show. And the line, P.T. Barnum used to say, the clowns are the pegs on which the circus is hung. By the time Feld came around in the 60s, he said, the clowns were so old, they could still take a fall. They just couldn't get up again. So he started what he called Clown College. Clown College was held right here. This is, again, I know this picture is probably not as large as it needs to be, but this is Venice, Florida, south of Sarasota. Originally, that building, to my knowledge, was an airplane hangar from World War II. That was the winter quarters for Ringling. That's where Clown School was held. So in the 60s, they had Clown College. Here is what's called a route card. And again, you can Google these things and you'd be surprised what's out there. But the route card basically said where you'll be at what city on what days. And this one happens to be red, so that tells me there was a red show. I was on the blue show, so mine were blue. And here's an application to Clown School. Now, I just happen to have one right here. This is interesting. I don't even have to look at this to tell you how much I remember. They asked the following questions. If you could be someone else, who would you be? Are you claustrophobic? What was the last book you read? When was the last time you cried was another one. They really wanted to know who you were. They wanted to know a little bit about your psychology, and they wanted to know if you could survive on a train living with other people. It wasn't uncommon on the road to see 5 or 6 kids whose parents were performers. None of them spoke the same language. You have a Bulgarian, a Polish kid, a Russian kid, maybe a black kid from King Charles Troop. They'd all be getting along just fine, thank you. And most of them knew the swear words, by the way. You could pick those up because they're kids. That's what they know. Darn kids. So that's the 60s. The Felds take over. I call these decades really the halcyon years. These are the years that I think we're all most familiar with, 60s, 70s, 80s. Here, the Industrial Revolution, which was now back maybe 1900, 1920s, perhaps, 1890s. Now we're talking 50s and 60s. You and I, we're the next generation. Our parents were in World War II or Korea. So we're the ones with the suburban sprawl. We're the ones who benefited by perhaps going to college. We're the ones who grew up with rock and roll. And in that umbrella, in that tent, if I can use that term, the circus became an anachronism. You no longer went to the circus as a farmer. It no longer came to you. You went downtown. The building was subsumed. Now you went into an arena. The exotic animals, well, you knew those from going to the zoo. Even the oddities. I mean, we had TV. You could watch A Man on the Moon by 1969. So you didn't go to be wowed so much. You went to share the emotional impact that your parents had as a kid and that your grandparents had. It was an anachronism. You went, what is the roar of grease paint, the smell of the crowd, right? And so these 3 decades are really the decades where guys like me, just kids kicking around in suburbia, had this opportunity, to go run away and join the circus, man, to live on a train. It was cool. Someone said, what do you do? And you said, you're a clown. 20 minutes later, they're just talking, and you'd end up talking about yourself, and you can't learn that way. So, back then I would, I'm only in town a little while. You wanted to kind of fit in. You didn't want to take over. But now if someone says, what do you do? You're a clown. Oh, hide the children. like something's wrong. So again, we come back to that question. How did this happen? Here, I have the term psychological here because man versus machine. These are all my terms. This is all me trying to put things in little boxes so we can understand perhaps the times. Industrial would be man versus machine. Here, psychological is the anachronism, huh? You go because your parents went. At the same time, 60s, 70s, and 80s, here's a snapshot of what was going on when I was on the show, which is 75 and 76. These two pictures are Bob Dylan. Up top, you'll see him putting whiteface on. Right here, he's putting makeup on. Here he is in whiteface on tour. During these 2 years, he had what was called the Rolling Thunder Review. And of course, that was big for folk music. And Bob Dylan, of course, is king of folk music. He's the chaplain of the singing folk song scene. So this, to me, is a snapshot of what was happening. Bob Dylan chose to do smaller arenas because he wanted it more intimate. He went on the road with trucks. He could have filled larger venues. He wanted that feel. He wanted to stay in touch, right? At the same time, you had late 60s, you had Woodstock and Wavy Gravy and these characters coming around, poking in and out that took clowning and kind of magnified what was happening at the time. Again, 76 was the bicentennial. This is a picture of a fire hydrant painted red, white, and blue. If you guys were around back then, you probably remember the whole world went red, white, and blue. At the same time, in these 2 years, you had Watergate hitting the newspapers. You had Vietnam winding down. The main picture in 75 was Jaws. Let's talk about fear. In 76, the top feature was The Omen. So one of them, you have an animal that scares everybody. The next you had, I mean, The Omen at the time, I don't know if my mom would have let me seen that. Here's an example. This guy might look familiar. Here's an example of red, white, and blue elephants and clowns. That's yours truly, riding Ronnie in center ring twice a day, 3 times on Saturday for 2 years. So, yeah, that was a great experience. And I have to tell you, I'm right with Fred Flintstone. If they made elephants the size of dogs, we would all have one. I don't know if you'd use them to vacuum, but we'd all have one. They're incredibly smart animals. Very, very smart, very sensitive animals. And they call them all bulls, but they're all female. They don't, at least when I was on the road, they did not have males. They're too strong, too powerful, too temperamental. And yeah, so there you go. Now, here's the business end of it. Again, we grew up in the 60s, right? So once corporations start getting a feel for what works, they expand on it. 1955, case in point, 2 major institutions came into being. One of them is McDonald's, 1955. Another one is Disney, 1955. And I'll put myself on the list. I'm also a creation of 1955. But I digress. I use these 3 here to exemplify how when something is successful, it's marketed, as we know. And this kind of grew out of television, I would say. And again, as the medium became more personal, as the screen entered the homes, the living rooms, instead of going out now to see the circus came to you, right? And it's interesting because Mickey Mouse still exists, obviously. Santa Claus is ubiquitous. Everyone knows Santa. But let me show you this. This is from, let me see if I can get this on here for you. Maybe now. This says Advertising Age. There's Ronald McDonald. This says Advertising Age recognizes Ronald McDonald as one of the top 10 icons of the 20th century. In the 80s and 90s, Ronald McDonald was as recognizable as these other 2 characters. I don't say that to promote anything or to push anything. I only say it to say, how do you go from here to today? How did he disappear? What happened? So again, this was from 55 to 215. That's when this character started to disappear. In 87, this is a picture of, in the actual photograph, I have this poster. This is a picture of my poster. There are maybe 600 clowns in this picture. Very hard to see, I know that, but you can get a feel for all the color. This was 1987. Ringling Brothers, it was the 20th anniversary of Clown School. So they sent us each a ticket to go to winter quarters to celebrate together the 20th anniversary. Now, at that point, you had approximately 50 students per year for 20 years. So what's that, a couple thousand students maybe? 1,000 clowns out in the world. Here is, and again, forgive me, I'll try to get this up in front of you. Here's a picture of our class. In this picture is one guy, oh, here, I can see it now. Here's a picture of our class. I'm in here somewhere. A friend of mine who's a magician in LA is in here. Steve Laporte was up for an Academy Award for makeup. Bill Irwin is Mr. Noodles on Sesame Street. My buddy Rick Davis formed American Youth Circus Organization. I mean, more than half of these people spent their life in entertainment, and that's directly attributable to a 3-month segment in their life. And I think it's a snapshot of the times. I don't think it's a success of the teaching skills or anything. I think we were all just in a place at a time. All right, so now I flip to the dark side again. At the same time that clowning is reaching this high point, the perverse or the provocative is happening, and I use music because I think that we all share this experience. In this picture, here's Alice Cooper. He was around in the 70s, 80s. He wore makeup, kind of scary. Bowie had an androgynous character that he used with a makeup that was a little bit different. This is Marilyn Manson. There's Kiss. And then more recently, there's a group that calls themselves the Insane Clown Posse. They wear makeup. And, you know, it's indicative of art in general to be provocative, to push the limit. So here they are taking what is sacred, you know, the clown character, and making it profane, taking it to a new limit. And I suggest, you can see where I'm going with this. I suggest that's what is happening, is that the clown that I knew and loved has been taken to such a point, but all of these characters had a following, but not to the extent that that's today. And I wouldn't say it was fear-based. Now we get into the question of, when you ask the average kid, the average person, the average adult, why don't you like clowns? You will get a pronoun for an answer. Here it is. It. Did you see the movie It? I read this book recently just to prepare, and it's not Stephen King's best work. I don't think, because it never hooked me. I never understood how this clown managed to get into the deepest fears of each of these characters. I did happen across something interesting, though. The term id, which is made famous by Freud, you know, ego, id, translated from Latin, is this, that, or it. So I half wonder if Stephen King wasn't playing with id when he wrote this. And again, that's outside of my realm, but I do like to when I find these connections, it makes me wonder, huh? So here is It. It is disturbing. I did not see the film. I did read the book. And here's a quote from the book. Tasty, tasty, beautiful fear, huh? Pennywise. Now, in case you didn't notice, I've been entering kind of a teeter-totter, because like Malcolm Gladwell, huh? The tipping point, you know, everything's fine. We've always had clowns. He's always been the dark side. You've got Joker and all these iterations over time. But at what point does it snap? This, in my mind, I look for patterns and then wonder what they mean. In the book It, the first murder occurs in the book in 1958. Then in 86, they all get together. And again in 2013, he uses 27 years as some sort of repetition. I don't know why. I actually looked up the number 27 to see if there's a significance in numerology, or, you know, I like to enter a writer's head and try to understand better. But I did discover this. I started with the McDonald's Corporation in 1986. I lasted 27 years and I left there in 2013. Evidently, I'm it. You're it. All right. Now, this gentleman was actually at my last, when I presented this program the last time. His name is Jeff Raz, and he wrote a couple of books. Here's one of them, The Secret Life of Clowns. Jeff was an instructor at Clown College in '97, which was the last year before Clown College closed. That picture I showed you, this is 1987, the 20-year anniversary. 10 years later, it was closed. Jeff was one of the instructors there, and shortly afterwards, he left. He left Ringling Brothers instructor and formed his own, what he called the Clown Conservatory in San Francisco from 2000 to 2010. He was the director and also the founder of that. What I really liked about this book is that Jeff, he had the Ringling experience at the tail end of Ringling. Ringling was really winding down, and it was gone probably 10 years after that, less than 10 years. But he also got hired by Cirque du Soleil. And I would suggest that Ringling was still that vestige, still that anachronism, whereas Cirque du Soleil is the next generation. Cirque du Soleil, if you've seen the show, any of their shows, it's really digitized. It's taken it to a surreal place. And extending on the success of people like Chaplin, many of their shows have gibberish for a sound, for background sound. There's no logic. You can't make sense of the words, which makes it universal. So you can play in Des Moines one week, you can play in China the next, because the sound is to evoke emotion, not to convey a meaning. But again, Jeff Raz, and he was attending at the last time I presented this. I had talked to him extensively on the phone because I wanted to pick his brain as well, since he was responsible for many years teaching the next generation. And as I said, when I went to clown school, most of the people from our class went on to do great things, and I'm sure Jeff had the equal effect on many people, because the type of person who applies to clown school is really got a different drummer going on there. So that was 2007. He was with Cirque du Soleil. Now, again, we bounce back and forth. We're getting more current now. This is a book called Scary Clowns. So on the screen, you'll see it says logical fallacy, inductive falsehood. If you start a logical argument with a conclusion, there's nowhere to go. If you're going to tell me that clowns are scary, that means all clowns are scary. That's your premise? Well, you don't have to prove anything. You just made a statement. This book I find very ironic. The last time I presented it, people said, who's the author? And there's no author listed. I don't know why. But on the back of the book, most of this book is pictures, okay? 90% pictures. On the back, it says, this book is stuffed full of photographs of clowns. Some are from long ago, many are from far away, a few were taken in the recent past. Coulrophobia, and I'll get to that in a minute, needs to be eradicated for the sake of many who suffer from it. Now, coulrophobia, and David brought this to my attention, and it was in his article that was in some of the reading, is an invented word from about the 80s or 90s. It is not recognized medically as phobia, because the medical term phobia is very specific, I guess. And the root word cholera is from, it's some reference to stilts or stilt walking. So the etymology of this word is very odd. But that's nothing compared to this book. Talk about odd. I think this is a good indication of where we stand and why I have so many questions. When you open this book to one of the first sets of pictures, on this side is Gacy, who, if you recall, was a murderer. On this side is Lou Jacobs, a very famous circus clown. If you look at my screen here, this is Lou Jacobs. In 1966, he got his own postage stamp awarded to him. And in 2018, Mr. Rogers had a postage stamp. Mr. Rogers was posthumously, I believe I pronounced that right, given that honor, right, of a postage stamp, to be held in such esteem as to have the postage stamp awarded, with your face on it. Lou Jacobs was still very much alive. In fact, he taught us in clown school. He was a German guy who had this very thick accent and was hands down, when you said Lou Jacobs, people almost genuflected. It was like Red Skelton or Chaplin himself. He was that highly respected. So to have a postage stamp in your honor in 1966, and then to compare him to Gacy, a murderer, is to state blatantly that you have no understanding of an artist, and we're right back to the kind of Joker character, this Disturbed. All right. So now I'd like to take a minute and postulate a little bit. This is another book I read. I actually read it previous. It's The Four Archetypes by Jung. The four archetypes include mother, rebirth, spirit, and trickster. Trickster specifically has a close relation to clowning. In folklore, it is the trickster. In clowning, the trickster could be the joker. It could be the jester. In every culture, and again, if you did a little reading or you'd like to do some reading, every single culture there exists. Well, maybe I shouldn't say every single culture. In most cultures, no matter how far back you go or where you are in the world, there exists a position that could be filled by, we'll call it the trickster, the joker, the jester, the shaman. And their job, their purpose was to violate the rules. Sometimes they wore a mask. They could act differently. They could speak truth to the king. In fact, that's one of my little inside jokes is, if clowns are jesters, then jesters speak truth to the king, to power, right? They speak truth to power. If you kill the clown, who's left to speak truth to power? Of course, I'm being facetious there, but it's an interesting question. So Jung speaks of the trickster. In preparing for the class, I talked to some people that I respect highly, and one of them was talking about specifically the fool, because each of these words, though similar, have different meanings. Fool, jester, clown. So let's talk about fool. What she brought to my attention was that the beauty of the fool is that he has the most potential to learn. He has the most potential. Whereas a trickster is mostly egocentric. The trickster will do whatever it takes to win. And in many stories, you'll see that. You'll see the trickster playing in mythology. You'll see him playing with humans, But even in the trickster, we can use cartoons as an example, Roadrunner as an example, because in fact, in many Native American fables, folklore, stories, tales, the coyote is the trickster. And in the Coyote Roadrunner cartoons, you have classic clowning. You've got the trickster, you've got, the chase, you've got the one-upmanship, right? And just like classic clowning, you drop an anvil on him. What'd you do that for? Pause, laughter, picks up the anvil, meep, meep, and he's off, right? The clown gets the hammer to the head, dead and alive, boom, he's dead. Fix it, set him up, then you hypnotize him and he comes back to life. Hey, what just happened? And you're off. Classic clowning. But I would suggest that's the clown world. What happens when the joker gets hold of the trickster? Now, instead of dropping the anvil on the Roadrunner, I would suggest that the joker would cut his head off, pick it up, and laugh at it. Where do you go with that? That's malevolent. That's dark. The beauty to laughter, and I've used this for years on stage, when they tell you to open with a joke, the reason they tell you that is Laughter is one of the only things outside of perhaps sex that unites people. In that moment, we're all united. And a friend of mine said, when you stop laughing, it's only because you stopped thinking about what's funny. It envelops your entire, when you are laughing, and the entire crowd is united. And right after that is when you make your point. When I was on stage doing educational programs, as soon as there was laughter, the next sentence was the message. Because now we're all united. You're open. You're wide open, Boom, here's your message. So it's a release of tension, and it's a uniting thing. So when the clown has the audience laugh, that unites the audience, despite what they were or who they were when they leave or when they came. When you have the malevolence, when you have the Joker, when you have the dark side, now you're based on fear. And fear is by nature divisive. Are you with me or against me? You have to draw a line when you're in fear. But the trickster uses both. The trickster is the angel and the fallen angel. It is both. All right. So in an effort to understand better on a sociology level, how did this happen? How is it the whole world finds clowns to be feared now? How did this happen? I can't blame just one movie. I can't blame a book or two, but there it is. The whole world seems to be thinking the same way. I came across this. This woman's name is Lauren Berlant from the University of Chicago, a teacher of literature, among other things. She wrote a book called Cruel Optimism, and I have that book. I've been waiting to read it. I don't have it in my hands yet. I've not read it, but she uses affect theory, and I know this is like one of those newer terms that I actually wrote the definition down, and when I find it, I'll read it to you. But affect theory talks about the emotional, reacting to things in an emotional way. And I would suggest if you live on a farm, it doesn't matter how you feel. The cows need to be milked. Your emotions are great. Get back to work, Nowadays, emotions have really come to the surface and taken on a lot of, I don't know about importance, but they're certainly recognized at a different level than they used to. And I don't mean that judgmentally, I just mean observationally. And I think that plays into what we're talking about. So here's a quote from her. It says, somewhere along the way, doing good has come to seem irrelevant or maybe just felt impossible. Regardless. My next slide has the redhead benched, And this used to be very common in almost every McDonald's, outside of McDonald's. Now you'll only find them at a Ronald McDonald House, which is what they call the house that love built. And this character was definitely beloved. I can speak to that. Kids would attack this guy like he was Santa Claus, run across the room and hug him. He was marketed as the ambassador of goodwill. And that's exactly, libraries, schools, parades. I mean, everyone loved Ronald. And again, I don't mean to get into marketing or, obviously the subtext is sales, but on a clown level and on a observational level. So let's talk about algorithms. I'm going to go back one slide on purpose this time, maybe two. In this picture, you'll see cell phones. I think this is a pivot point. This is where we go from the circus clown or the beloved clown as, agrarian and then maybe an anachronism, right? When we grew up. Now, once a cell phone comes out, a couple things happen. Communication changes, and also, as an entertainer, I am no longer in charge. By that I mean if I'm dressed as a clown and I'm working, let's say, at a restaurant and people come in with everyone has a phone, but even at the beginning when you had these flip phones, no longer was there downtime, because if you look like a clown, you're on, because they can take a picture of you at any time. I mean, you took a glove off, you happen to be, let's say, not at your best, you didn't look very good, versus someone like Mickey Mouse, who is so packaged and so well maintained that Disney has their finger on every second that character is visible. They know who he's with. So once the clown, once the entertainer loses control of his audience, Now the audience can take pictures whenever they want. They can record whenever they want. They can post whenever they want. You no longer have control over your brand. The audience does. Not only the audience, but a child. So, in fact, we've since outgrown it. But for a long time, the child knew more about technology than their parent did, and that was a very interesting time. That has since gone away because that generation grew up. But I think the digital revolution has done two things. One, it gave control to the child, and the other is, in that process, if a child says, I don't like this, in the past, I don't know about your parents, but mine would say, I don't either, get back to work. I mean, they would acknowledge it was a joke, but there was something to be done here. In the digital world, if you don't like something, almost unknowingly, an algorithm is working. We'll use music as an example. My kids no longer have radios in their home. They've got one in their car. I don't know if they use it. They have a program. I'll use Pandora as an example. You plug in, I like this, play more like this. Well, under the guise, you may think that you're saying, here's what I like, but there's an algorithm saying, here's what you like. By eliminating what you don't like, you never know what you don't like. You never understand fully what's out there because you're not exposed anymore. And I think that's very dangerous, and I think it plays into, and when I say dangerous, I should back that off. I don't mean algorithms are dangerous. I mean, there's a huge beauty in technology, don't get me wrong, but I don't think many people are aware. It's easy to get lazy and to let this make decisions for you, and that's where you get into trouble. But that is, I think, what happened. If you give an 8-year-old says, I don't like clowns, and you start putting that out there, then eventually your technology says you don't like clowns, right? All right, so in that process, here it is in the illusion of choice, which is the algorithm, right? Yeah, I like this, I like this, I like this. I don't like that. That's the illusion of choice. The algorithms are making those choices for you. We'll call that narrowcasting, and in that process, you're surrounded with like-minded people. You're surrounded with tribes, huh? Someone said, I don't know who said this, but I really like it. We don't mix people, we sort them. So if you're sorting people, to me, that's the same as... It's prejudicial in that it is prejudging. You go here, you go here. In the process of sorting, it doesn't have to be bad. Prejudging isn't necessarily bad, but it certainly can be because it's blind. You might not even realize you're doing it or why you're doing it. And I think clowns fall into that. If you say at one point, I don't like clowns, then forevermore, because you've no longer exposed yourself to the possibility that you could change, it's not there anymore. Extending on that affect theory, there's Cyan Nagai, who is also at University of Chicago. She came up with a word that I really like. It's a portmanteau. It's two words together. She calls it stuplimity, which is sublime stupidity. And I think both of them not only describe the situation, but they describe clowns, huh? Sublime stupidity. She defines it as an experience of being astonished or overwhelmed by a vast or intimidating object, right? Vast or intimidating object. You see Ronald McDonald, oh, warning, I don't like this. Back in the day, before cell phones, before digital, a child, I don't like this. The parent would say, it's okay. The adult would say, it's okay, look, The child would take their cue from the parent, and now they still do, but now there's another option, and that option is taking some power. And so I don't like this, boom, gone. So let me tell you a story because I love stories. When I was talking to Jeff Raz, Jeff wrote that one book that I had in my hand a minute ago, The Secret Life of Clowns. We were talking about hospital clowning, which is very popular and very necessary. And he said he went to this one room and his kid was totally terrified of clowns. And of course you take your cues, If you're not wanted, you don't go there. So Jeff ignored the child, but every time he walked by the door, he would drop his hat Then he'd do a little hat trick. And what he was doing is building curiosity. Like, what's going on up there? Well, he forgot his hat, and he went down and did some more visiting on other floors. And when he realized he'd left it upstairs, he came back. And the nurse at the nurse's station said, "Oh my God, you have to go back to that room. You've got to go back to that room. The child's been asking for you." And he spent maybe 20 minutes in that room with that child. And the whole reason was he had tweaked the curiosity of the child, right? So I like to say that the opposite of fear is curiosity. You cannot have the two together. If you're walking down the street and there's a car coming at you at 50 miles an hour, you're not going to be curious. You're going to get out of the way. If you're in fear, it's fight or flight, you're out of there. You don't take time to say what if, why, what is. So when you build curiosity, you begin to break down and question, right? Inquiry-based learning. So when entertainment is based on curiosity, there's less opportunity for fear to be in the front. So here, you may have noticed I've had this red dot, this clown nose, in a lot of my slides. It says the world's smallest costume. If you have a clown nose like this, it becomes permission to be both a noun and a verb. A clown clowns. Huh? That's what they do. It's who they are. I think if I can take us away from some of the depths that we've been diving into, the circus clown that I knew, that we perhaps share in common, the white face, the broad gesture, some of that I think will go away. But the need will always be there. The comic fool is a necessary part of entertainment and life. We need to laugh. So here's your homework, and we're wrapping up soon, but it says hospital clowns. If you Google hospital clowns, you will find the following adjectives: caring, effective, therapeutic, necessary. You will find all proactive, positive, from the medical, from the children, from organizations, okay? And it says the need for fools, and here's Patch Adams, if you remember him, a doctor years ago who did clowns, and Robin Williams played him in a movie, right? So here's my message from Chaplin back to Joker. We opened with Joker to Chaplin. Here's the reverse. He says, "Dear Joker, these are modern times. Smile, though your heart is breaking." You may not know that he wrote that song. At the end of the movie, Modern Times, they play that on a violin. He walks down the railroad tracks. The lyrics were added years later, and I think it was 56, which when the tent came down, right? That same year, Nat King Cole, I think, made it popular that year. And you probably know that song, "Smile, though your heart is breaking." Kind of a sad, definitely Chaplin-esque, huh? All right. So now, here's my suggestion. You can't just ignore a problem and say, "Oh, I don't like that, it'll go away," because that's exactly what I'm saying we can't do. So here's a classic scary clown of today. In fact, this was sent to me recently by a friend. This was right before Halloween. Someone sent this to me. It's a scary clown, and he's delivering donuts. This is a true story. There's a company that was doing this, and the name of the company is Hertz Donut. Now, I think I was in 5th grade for about 8 years, not physically, just mentally. I mean, that's how my brain is wired. But when I was a kid, they'd say, "Hey, you want a donut?" And the other kids say, "Sure." And you punch him in the arm and say, "Hertz Donut." Ha, 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 ha. Hertz Donut. This company is called Hertz Donut. Like someone's cashing in on this, and they have a clown delivering them. So I'd like to think, not unlike having Black Sabbath playing now in the elevator, right? What was once profane is now commonplace. I would like to think that what I call clown noir, these scary clowns, I think will take a back seat and become like the fear of a roller coaster. "Oh, that was scary, let's do it again," huh? But what's lacking in that, what I don't like about that, is the beauty of laughter is missing. It's still based on the excitement of fear, huh? I'm not drawn to that as much. So here it is, creepy clowns delivered. Now, if you Google clowns, just the word clowns, you can hit images, and you will see image after image of things like this, just scary, terrifying, horrible. And you will see adjectives like horrible, horror, scary, evil, creepy. So hospital clowns, clowns. Still hope, but it's getting narrow cast, huh? It's getting cast in a smaller bucket. So let me tell you this little story. This, by the way, is Otto Griebling, who is, if you say that name in front of circus clowns, like the sky opens and you hear, ah, he's like the god of tramp clowns, huh? And let me suggest this too, because I'm off on a rant now. In the 1920s, when the Depression hit, circus was in its heyday. In fact, it's the epitome of comedy. I mean, the best comedy from vaudeville seems to be in that era. But that's when you see the birth of the tramp clown, what we would call today a hobo or a homeless person. I mean, that would not be acceptable today, to have a homeless person turn into a character that we would present. But there it is. Wary Willie, which was Emmett Kelly's character, the tramp clown appeared at that time. Today, so that was pathos in response to depression, right? Today, everything is fear. There's a lot of fear out there, especially since 9/11. And we have horror clowns as the clown equivalent, huh? So here's Otto Griebling. This is a very small story. It's called The Two Wolves, and it's a Native American tale. There was an elder, a grandfather, if you like, sitting with his grandson, just watching the river go by, enjoying nature. And the grandfather said to his grandson, he says, I want you to know, inside of each one of us, there are two wolves, and they do battle. Says the one wolf is ego. The one wolf is evil. He's selfish. The one wolf, he will devour you. The one wolf, he will take every advantage he can. The other wolf, well, that one is good. That one is selfless. It's empathy. It's all that you know, and it is love incarnate. And every day they do battle, back and forth, battle. And then he was quiet. His grandson thought about it, and he couldn't help himself. After a while, he had to know. He says, well, grandfather, tell me, who wins? Who wins the battle? And the grandfather just turned to him and said, the one you feed. The one you feed. So there you have it. And here's what's being fed. As we are speaking, there is what's called Red Nose Day around the world. This is a fundraiser done across the United States. I think it's global, and it's to raise money for children who are less fortunate, specifically to feed the hungry, right? So my closing thought is feed the nose, huh? I think I can. That's the little clown from the little engine that could. The only PS I have today is that since I wrote this and since I presented, Ringling has said they're coming back. I don't know if you read that in the paper. They're coming back in 2023. They're supposed to resurrect the Ringling Circus. And also I wanted to mention that yesterday I had a call from this gentleman, Greg DeSanto, who was on the Ringling Show for 10 years and now has the International Clown Hall of Fame in Wisconsin. And next time I do this show, I will have a lot more information that he has available. So I talked a lot. I really appreciate it. I'll unmute every one of you here. And Sandy, if you can, I guess you can unmute yourselves. How's that? And let's see if we have questions or chat room or how I can help you. Clown TG says, let's see if I'm all the way up here. Is the clown essentially a comedian that wears a face paint, etc.? Is it likely that some performers will reinvent the comedic role as opposed to the scary? That was Ted. Yeah, I think so, and I think it's specific. The clown, by nature, costume, and action, is specific to the medium. And by that I mean, there's an expression in theater, fill the space you're in. So if you're in the circus arena, you got a lot of space to fill. You're going to run to one side and run to the other. You're going to be as big as life itself. But if you're in a restaurant and there's a table of children and you ran over and filled the space, they'll jump out of their seat. So you just like right now, I'm in a box, right? TV is a close-up medium. So this is very intimate and very subtle. So the answer is specific to the audience and specific to the medium. Fantastic class. Oh, thank you. I might read that one again. Wonderful, thought-provoking, great class. Oh, okay. Are the Shriner clowns basically the last ones? I hope not, because I feel fine. Yeah, that's interesting. That was one of the conversations that I had with this gentleman, Greg DeSanto, because he runs the International Clown Hall of Fame. He's curating clown stuff from the last almost 100 years. I mean, he has stuff from guys from the 20s to the 30s. I asked him who was on the show in 56 when the tent closed, and he sent me the list of the clowns because I have a story in mind, and I wanted to know if the character I was thinking of was where they were. So to answer that question, and I think it fits in nicely with what we're talking about, because part of the reason clowns don't have the respect that a physical comic can have, someone like Skelton or Carol Burnett or Lucille Ball, right? Because there's such a huge spectrum of ability and interest, and especially with clowning, there's a very big base of part-timers. I don't like the word amateur because it sounds condescending, or it sounds like judgmental. You need that, but if that's what's used as if that's what you're judging on, it'd be like comparing a garage band to the Rolling Stones. I mean, there's a huge spectrum out there. And Shriners, in and of themselves, do great work. And within the Shriners, there's a huge amount of talent variation. So I'm certainly not going to determine, do you ever clown and put on your garb? Well, I'll tell you, I'm a recovering clown. I've fallen off the circus wagon many times. It's a good question. The short answer is I'm really drawn to storytelling recently, for the same reason I think I was drawn to clowning originally, and that is the history, the romance, the spectrum of potential. I mean, clowns can be musicians, ventriloquists, magicians, physical comics, acrobats. If you make it funny, you can be a clown. You could say Jack Benny was a clown with a violin. Were original clowns, Commedia dell'arte, scary? Was Scaramucci a real clown? Good questions. I don't have a definite answer for you. Commedia is very interesting. There's some very interesting. If you go back in history and study Commedia dell'arte, which is where we get I want to say payaso in Spanish. Pagliacci, the Italian opera, comes from Perrault, who was a character in Commedia. Harlequin or Arlecchino was a Commedia. Punch and Judy shows were, to some extent, you're looking at before the Renaissance, almost Middle Ages, where a lot of this was being cobbled together to defy the powers that be, which included both royalty and church. So there was a lot of stuff going on there. I don't have enough knowledge without doing some reading ahead of time to revisit that and explain it better. And I'm not sure that the purpose was the same. Did McDonald's ever want you to be a Ronald? Yeah, I knew Ronald very well, thank you. And I was actually instrumental in writing, being on the writing team for a number of shows that were international with the McDonald's. And we did Character Counts, which was about character, obviously. We had one on recycling. Oh, God. Reading, of course, reading. What was your day like in the circus? Did you end up marrying someone from the circus? No. Don't ever date someone that you work with. Okay, a typical day in the circus. Interesting. My first year on the road, I lived on the train, and then you would take the bus to, we called it the building. Pretty funny because second year I had a car. So you drive into the city, you drive into like Denver, Then you realize, like, this is 1975. You got a paper map. That's about it. So you like roll the window down and say, "Hey, where's the building?" Like people on the street say, "The building? There's one there." And then the auditorium, the complex, the arena. You had to think of what adjective goes with that town. So let's see if I answered your question. Early Ronalds were scary. Yeah, there's a lot of scary clowns out there. Don't get me wrong. I agree with you. What happened with the Ronald program was originally they took a costume and just put people in it. And then they realized in short order we need consistency, and you see the faces the same, the body style the same, the costumes the same. You see the standard go way up, and a very consistent. And then they had obviously the icon on TV to draw from for the kids. What makes a clown famous and better than the average clown? The taste of the audience. There you go. There's one for everybody. There's an audience for anyone. So, there are a lot of people who like entertainers that I'm not fond of, whether it's a musician or whoever. And what do you want from them? You could Google Puddles the Clown right now, and you will find a gentleman who has an operatic voice in complete 1800s clown outfit, ruffled collar, complete white face, singing beautiful songs. But here's the twist. For example, he sings the theme to Gilligan's Island to the tune of Stairway to Heaven. you got to see it to believe it, folks. So there's the comedy, kind of like who was the one who did Here I Come to Save the Day? Oh, yeah, that was Mighty Mouse, but who was the comedian that came out and did it on stage? Oh my God.
Andy Kaufman.
Thank you, Andy Kaufman. Thank you for that. Exactly. I mean, just classic. It was so simple and so beautiful and so wonderfully executed. It was hysterical. I mean, it just hysterical. So to me, that's clowning is the brilliance of counterpoint. Taking two things that don't belong together, putting them together, or you have, like I said, the fool who has the most to benefit, the absolute, all of the Jack Tales, right? Jack and the Beanstalk. There are hundreds of Jack Tales. They're British folk tales, and he's a fool, but he always ends up winning. I mean, that is a clown. My favorite, my earliest recollection was Ray Bolger, The Wizard of Oz, the Scarecrow. I mean, that still to this day is, to me, he has all the answers and doesn't even know it, Okay, I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself here. What makes a clown famous? Well, a good PR agency. Everyone knows Emmett Kelly, but to some extent he was a very smart businessman, and he promoted himself very well. Otto Griebling was every bit as respected. How long did it take you to get into costume? And the answer is, how much time do you have? I mean, yeah, that's silly. I liked to take an hour, because I think getting into costume and face is about 1/3 of it. I think 2/3 of it is mental. You want to be in the place. You want to remember that it's the first time for the audience to see something you may have done 100 times. You want to make it important, So I've got a couple stories I'm trying to write on that subject. The enthusiasm and research you craft is inspiring. You guys, what do you want? Money? Is that what you want? Money? Shakespeare plays the fool often speaks the truth. Yeah. And classic. Yeah, I think Shakespeare is a great example of placing the fool and the selfish fool sometimes. Puck, for example, sitting up there, the little puppeteer making things happen and laughing at the results, huh? Yeah, that would be the trickster. But I'm by no means a Shakespearean. I don't know Shakespeare well. I'm not a psychologist or a sociologist. Like everything I just said is just, these are my observations. So thank you for listening to them. What else? Any other questions here? Let me go back and just see if I skipped anyone. Showing a picture. Mine is showing you picture as frozen. I'm sorry to hear that.
Someone wants to know where you perform now.
Well, again, I'm doing storytelling, which is, I absolutely love it. I'm leaving Friday to go to North Carolina. And this is very exciting for me because I'll be sharing the stage with some nationally known storytellers who I never worked with directly, and I'm a little gobsmacked at the opportunity. I'm given 20 minutes on stage and then 10 minutes the next day to tell the kids. So that's where I'm at now. And I don't know if you realize, but I have my website up here, mikeperry.biz, and I think I have, Mike Perry Storyteller, gmail.com. So, that's me. And if you ever want, information, just email me. I'll be happy. But this Saturday, I'll be in North Carolina at Cary Theater in North Carolina. The following week, I'll be in Kentucky to teach what I'm calling off the page and on the stage. In storytelling, quite often someone will read a story and try to memorize it, and then they present it as though they're speaking it from a book. And we're trying to break the difference between making something look and feel extemporaneous, even though it's ingrained and blah, blah. Somebody stop me, because I'll just keep talking. What else? Sandy, are there any questions that I'm missing here?
No, I don't see anything. It appears that you've answered everything on the page.
Great. Well, I said it at the beginning, and I really mean it. I'm absolutely thrilled to present this because it niggles at me. I'm by no means finished with it. I really want to talk to a sociologist and find out how is it possible that this is happening all at once, And
I have a quick question.
Please.
What is more challenging to you today in terms of performing? Is it writing your own material or developing costumes and outfits? Can you talk about the challenges you face in that regard?
Sure. Well, I don't really do clowning anymore, so this is my costume.
Okay.
But as far as clowning goes, this is a very interesting question because the last slide I had up, the guy, Greg DeSanto, who's got the International Clown Hall of Fame, we were talking about the downfall of Ringling. And I went to see the show maybe a couple of years before it folded. And I was just, I didn't even go back and talk to the guys afterwards because I was just like, they're phoning it in. I did not see anything original. I did not feel I didn't feel what I was supposed to, what I wanted, give me what I want. I'm an audience, give it to me. And part of what Greg was telling me was at that point, all those costumes were now production costumes. Here's a picture. These pictures at the beginning are me, by the way. Here's a picture of me in production costume in 1976. And that costume weighed about 20 pounds. It was completely sequined. And that is kind of an expansion. And I'm sorry, if you go to my Facebook page, I think it's Michael Perry. I'm sure I've got it posted. But that costume weighed a ton, designed and made in New York City. And it was a takeoff on the classic white-faced clown. I mean, we didn't even talk about the classic. There are 3 classic styles of makeup. The white-faced clown was the intelligent clown. If you watched, there was a circus show when I was a kid with Don Amici. And there would be the white-face who would teach you how to play the trumpet. Like this, And then the buffoon, the Auguste, like this, Bam, knocks the guy's hat off or, establishes conflict. And the white face was the intelligent, the teacher, who would get angry, and the buffoon was like, watch this, So this is a classic white face outfit with pantaloons that look like Jodhoppers, I think is a term from German. White, kind of a cone hat. The traditional European white face had red ears and non-symmetrical makeup, one eyebrow up, one down. But that's going way back. America just takes everything and, mix it up, serve it out, whatever you want. You can do whatever you want. But that's a classic white face. I don't know if I answered your question because I go off on these tangents. I apologize if I didn't. Did I answer that for you? What I was going to say was Greg was saying that by the time the circus really started winding down, losing its audience, all the clowns were dressed in production numbers. They no longer built, designed, bought, made their own costumes. So in that process, you're no longer building a brand or a character. You're climbing into an outfit, right? Which isn't necessarily bad, like climbing into Ronald McDonald. But yeah, today's clown is much more likely to be simple, huh? Little hat, maybe a rubber nose, funny eyebrows. I tell a few stories for kids, and I just take an old pair of glasses and I have some kind of fuzzy eyebrows that I glue on that are on there, and I wear an apron. I have a character that I call the unnoun custodian, and we talk about an object that is an orphaned object, and then I tell a story about it. It's unnoun, no longer has a story. There you go. We got 5 minutes. What else do we have, folks? Anything?
I have a question, Mike.
Please.
I'm not familiar with the Shriner Circus, even though I've heard of it my whole life. I went to a real Barnum Bailey show in the 50s, and I was petrified of the clowns, to tell you the truth.
Oh, you're the one.
I don't really know what's the difference between the Shriner Circus and Barnum Bailey. Is it just smaller, or is it anything to do with the Shriners?
Yes.
I don't really know anything about it.
Yeah. My understanding is the Shriners produce a show. So what they do is they hire acts. We'll take an elephant act and a tiger act and a Risley act and a balancing act and a teeterboard act. They'll plug in their own clowns because the Shriners have clowns within their organization that they promote, and they, that's part of their culture, I guess is a good word. But they produce their own shows locally. They produce them. I think some of them travel. I haven't done shrine dates, but they cobble together. They produce it, and then the money goes to. Is it St. Jude's? Is that theirs? I mean, they have their own charities that they support. So that is strictly versus Ringling, which is by no means is it charitable. I mean, it's not. It's a money-making industry. And if you look at Feld Entertainment, all of the ice shows, all of the Disney shows, all of this stuff says Feld Entertainment. They branched out and they book everything. But yeah, I hope that answered your question, Barb.
Thank you. It did.
Wow. Okay. Well, we got a couple of minutes. What else? Was there anything anyone disagreed with or wanted more information about?
Is Cirque du Soleil solid?
Solid? By that you mean financially?
Yeah. Yes.
It's funny you asked that. Is that Larry speaking?
Yes.
I think I did hear a rumor that they're on the ropes because of COVID. But I don't know the answer to that. I know they're out of, I want to say Montreal or Quebec. They're up there. Yeah, I hope they are. My concern for them was they exploded. I mean, they went from like 1 or 2 shows to like 50. I mean, they had shows on it, the Beatles show and this show and that show. And I thought, I sometimes worry that, you spread yourself too thin and you start watering down the brand. Because I've seen, I saw one that they did years ago and it was beyond belief. I mean, it was just unbelievable what they did technologically. Yeah, I don't know the answer, but I've heard that they're hurting.
My daughter's first job after she graduated from college actually was with Ringling Brothers. And she hated it. She was there for a little more than a year. She hated the way the animals were treated.
What year was that, Larry?
That would have been, I think that was 1994, 95.
What do you know what show she was on?
No, I don't. But I do know that her job was precede the circus. She had to trade circus tickets for lodging.
Yeah, paper the house.
Yeah, and she thought it was just a terrible job.
Interesting. Yeah, well, there you go. There you have it.
I knew a guy in Point Breeze who was my neighbor, and his brother, who I met, and I can't remember his name, but he was the head of either the blue or the red train.
Ah,
Or the group. And he would make all the advance, preparations, and it was a huge job.
unbelievable.
The last name was Dylan.
Interesting.
And yeah, I thought that was really interesting. He, he worked there for many years.
Okay, go ahead.
He liked it because he wasn't part of the circus. He was just doing all the advance.
Yeah. In both cases, I think it's interesting because when I was at that one slide, I was saying 60s, 70s, and 80s, I do believe was the halcyon days. I think that's when everything was still, we were still riding that wave of, oh, it's the circus. And then, everything kind of reality is shape-shifting. And all of these valid points are indicators of today versus then. Yeah.
Michael,
Hmm?
Michael,
Yeah.
just curious on the Ronald McDonald job that you had.
Yeah.
I mean, Ronald McDonald was so big; it was all over the United States. Was your life just going from one restaurant to the other? And it must have been just either fantastic or it must have been a real drudgery.
Well, it's like Santa. There's just one. And I had parts of 4 states, 175 stores, I think. So, yeah, it was, what? I always thought it was a gift. I don't want to get all squishy here, but, when I was saying before, when you put face on, when I put face on, I always thought of that as a transition into a different place. And I take that very seriously because I think, if you're going to, I like to use my powers for good. I used to tell myself stuff like this because you knew you were impacting people and you wanted to make sure that was a good impact. So yeah, the drudgery, it was like the job became, let's say you had a new show and you were on the road with it for 2 years. You're doing 2 shows a day, 5 days a week for 2 years. By the end of it, you could do it blindfolded in your sleep. So that at the beginning you got the honeymoon stage, and then you've got the ho hum, and then eventually it's like a marriage. Any job is like a marriage. So you have to keep it alive. You have to find new ways to keep it friendly and fresh and relevant, and not only to yourself but to the audience. So yes to all of the above. I mean, the relationship to me, any entertainment, storytelling, singing, anything is a relationship with an audience. It's either there or it's not there, and you have to feed it or be aware of it.
What was the true story of how they treated the animals? I'm a zoo person. I object to things that PETA does. What's your feeling about their true
Well, I mean,
treatment?
when I was on the show, these men, it was mostly men, but the women too. If they were an animal act, and traditionally, I'll back up a little bit. Traditionally in the circus, when I was on the road, all the animal acts were German. All the aerial acts and flyers were Latino or Spanish speaking, Mexican, South American, Spanish. All the teeterboard and the floor exercise, they were all Bulgarian, Hungarian, Soviet satellite countries. And the clowns were suburban idiots like me. Getting back to the animal acts, it's been my experience. We had a vet on the road. We did not have a doctor. These were people's livelihoods, and if the animal was sick, they were out of a livelihood. It's hard to look at the past using today's lens. And you can do that with anything in history. We're all blinded by the moment. I like to counter some of my own logic by saying, what the heck am I doing wrong today that we're going to laugh at 20 years from now? What were you guys thinking? Because we're blinded by it. We're subsumed by it. And maybe it's algorithms, telling us whatever. I don't know. Maybe it's cell phone technology. I don't know. For a while, I smoked for 30 years. So to answer your question, I personally never witnessed what I would call cruelty to animals. But you do have to realize that if you're walking into a cage with 20 tigers, they can kill you. I was on the road and they had a motorcycle act with a trapeze underneath. And for the finale, it was on a wire, tight wire, and it would rock back and forth, and then it would start spinning and go backwards, right? And the girl fell and died. And so what happens? They call for clowns. You know the music. If the music changes, something went wrong. Something goes wrong, you go out there. Pay no attention to that. Look at this. I mean, that's circus. And that's what I mean about agrarian. You know, the original circus was so close to reality. You know, when we went to the show as a kid, and I say this if you liked the circus, you know, you smelled the elephants. Oh, they always smell. You know, if you're a farmer going to the circus, it's like you probably didn't even notice it, you know, because you're around that all day long. So every generation comes at it for a different reason, with a different paradigm, with different eyes. But I personally, I never witnessed. I know for a fact that the guy who trained elephants when I was on the road, 18 elephants. Here's an interesting story. You probably know anatomically, an elephant walks on its toes, right? If you look at an elephant's foot, it's this big circle. But if you take an X-ray, you're looking at his fingertips. It's a big pad here. And you know, the cartoons are always afraid of a mouse. Well, in reality, for example, in winter quarters, my first year, at the end of the elephant act, which was called menagerie, all the center ring elephants would walk out, and they would mount each other. Boom, 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 boom. Center one goes here. Boom, 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 boom. And you're on the elephant, so you're hold on, you're coming off, right? So there were 18 elephants. There's one this way. If you're in the center ring, they're right there. So there's one here and like 8 more and 8 more. Well, these are all facing the right way. This one's facing forward. These are all facing the wrong way. So when these jump down, they have to turn around, they tail up, and they all march off. Well, I was on the second elephant. We were brand new in the show. The kid behind me was petrified. We had gone to clown school together. He was absolutely petrified, terrified of riding an elephant. And he made a huge mistake. He thought, well, I'll ride the smallest one. That'll be the easiest. And it's the opposite. When you're riding an elephant, I mean, your body is going like, you know, cancel my chiropractor. I mean, you're moving. And the little one, you know, because he has to keep up. He has to move twice as fast, and his bony shoulders are moving. So this poor guy behind me, when the elephants are all mounted like this, when the elephant jumped down and turned around, it spun so quick he fell off. So he was on elephant number 1. There were 17 more elephants. I'm on elephant number 2. So I see this guy. So my elephant jumps down, turns around. I see him laying on the ring curb. There are 17 elephants coming at you. Now here's where I was talking about the toes. An elephant doesn't like, his foot is very sensitive. He doesn't like to step on things. A horse will step in his own poop. An elephant won't. He'll step right over it. They don't want to step on things. That's why you'd see, like in the elephant act, you know, the lady in a costume would lay down, the elephant would put his foot over her face. He doesn't want to step on that. So my elephant stepped over him. 2 guys pulled the guy out, and he was gone the next day. Strike one, you're done. They can make another clown. They can't make another elephant. So, I mean, I go off on these stories, but I do think that, you know, social mores, and that's what we're really talking about. Things change, you know. Right now, clowns are scary. They used to be, you know, elephant acts used to be normal. Now, by all means, of course not, you know. I'm in total agreement. I don't think animals belong in the circus. That day is come and gone. But it doesn't.
I applaud you for that.
Yeah, no, but it doesn't. It's like any history lesson, right? It doesn't negate studying history, right? You still have to acknowledge this is what happened. This is the way it was. So, good.
True.
And again, I try to present all this observationally, not as I don't want it to be what I think. I want it to be what I saw, and I apologize if it comes out different than that.
Yeah, you took me back to my childhood.
Did I? Well, that's not so bad. Now you have to have you can have peanut butter and jelly for dinner.
Hey, that's an idea.
It is an idea. Well,
Thank you very much, Mike. It was a wonderful presentation.
I'm so glad to be here. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, and visit if
Thank you, Mike.
any questions. By all means, just email me, huh?
Thank you.
Thanks.
Soon.
See you down the road, as they
Thank
say.
Thank you so much. Bye.
See you down the road. All right, time to say goodbye.